Hello and welcome to the Understanding Narcissists YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me. In this episode, I want to talk about the interplay between a narcissist's personality and their narcissism. That sounds kind of funny because the interplay, the interaction between the two things consists of two parts, generally. Broadly speaking. The first is the burden that the narcissism places on their personality. That sounds strange, and I'll go into that a little further down the road. But needless to say, the narcissism has a higher priority. So, in their daily lives, in their behavior, no matter what they may like to do or want to do, given the extent of their personality or what's intact and who they are aside from the narcissism, if such a thing exists, which I think it does, a separate personality, the question is, how much does that come through the narcissism? Well, the narcissism takes high priority, and they have to accommodate that first, the narcissistic desire, despite what their other interests might be. So, just to take the simplest case, people have hobbies. Narcissists have hobbies. However, when there is a threat to their illusion, a threat to their control, a threat to their mastery over their domain and environment, whatever it may be, real or perceived, external or internal, they have to deal with it narcissistically with one of the methods I've gone into in previous videos. Now, there are other methods. I'm just saying that what I've gone into describes the whole process by which they manipulate and control. All that stuff, that content, that's the narcissism, and that has to come out, and that's how it's exercised. That's how it's expressed. So no matter what they may feel or want to do aside from the narcissism, that has to happen. If they have a hobby or an activity they're doing, they will drop that stuff so fast. They need to have their lives free, their schedules cleared, so that they can respond to these things. They've got to have that all set up to accommodate the narcissism. And that includes you, by the way. You are a slave to it. You have to accommodate it and serve it as well at any cost. But here's sort of the kicker here. Their personality, whatever it may be, has some significance because the personality determines how the narcissism is expressed. It gives a vehicle to the acting out that they have to do in order to control and maintain control. So there's preference there in the personality as well. And that's why I said at the beginning of this video that it's an interplay, the interaction, how they work off of each other. It's an organizational thing that I'm talking about to describe and model and predict their behavior like we're always trying to do and derive usefulness from it. That's where the usefulness of all of this comes from, hopefully. And that's where it can get a little tricky or dicey because introduce the personality back into the equation, which I think is the correct thing to do, which I think is the accurate thing to do, and you realize that the difference between narcissists, I find, and you can take me up on this, if maybe it's just a problem of semantics, I find that the difference lies in a personality aside from the narcissism. Now, I say aside very lightly. I'm not trying to create a strict demarcation, a solid line here that distinguishes the two. I'm not trying to do that, but I am trying to point out, at the very least, as a matter of understanding, that it helps or might be beneficial to think of them as having a personality aside from the narcissism. Because the personality can help determine how the narcissism will come through. This poses a lot of problems, and is very problematic, because the narcissism is what is immediately apparent in the first place. What you first see is the illusion and all this garbage that they throw at you when you first meet them to try to trick you, and you buy into it wholesale and whatnot. And so, even though the personality is kind of shining through, sometimes you're really on the wheel at that point in time, so you're not going to see anything. As time goes on, you get a better idea of their own life choices and preferences, what you can make out and distinguish from the narcissism, which, again, I say that very loosely, very lightly, because it's impossible to do so. I think the narcissism is always at work. But you have to account for the differences between narcissists. And I don't think the differences between narcissists is due to their narcissism. Their narcissism is what makes them exactly the same. Their narcissism is what brings you and I together, and that we have a understanding, even though we know entirely different narcissists. This is a human mental disorder. And that connective leads me to believe that it's almost a constant, or what you may call an invariant. It doesn't change. It's not. It's a strict pattern, or a very strict pattern, and the differences between them, and their differences in their choices and their flexibility, I think arises from something different. They are people. They have personalities. They prefer different things. They've got hobbies. They've got interests. They've got their own sort of emotional complex going on. The assumption up until this point, up until this video, has been that the narcissism is the sole entirety of their existence. That's who they are. That's what they are. They're narcissists. Sure, they're people in there somewhere, but the narcissism is what rules the roost, and that's not going anywhere, and that's what you're always seeing. And that is kind of true. I say that for reasons of safety and precaution. And it is an assumption. I think it's a very safe assumption. But I don't say that to dehumanize them. You have to acknowledge that as the sole thing, the fiber of their being, even though it may not be entirely true. Clearly, they have a personality at work, and that personality is sort of the framework for how they act and behave narcissistically. So there's choices and preferences there. So that's why it's kind of a duality. It's got the interplay, the interaction between the two things. It's not just the narcissism rules. Even though the narcissism rules ultimately and decides their behavior and what they're going to do, you already know what they're going to do before they do it. You already know how they're going to behave in a certain situation, how they're going to respond to something, how they're going to even look ahead. Their foresight, you can gauge it and identify it yourself with an understanding of the narcissistic personality. The variations you see, I think, are due to personality, and it's the personality that determines how the narcissism will come out. So then you go for the big question, which is, well then, which is it? Is it, in any given situation, is it the narcissism you're saying, or their personality? Does the narcissism determine how they live their lives and how they structure everything so they can serve the narcissism? Or is it for some personality preference? And I don't know the answer to that. You tell me. I think they're both at work. Which one dominates? I'd probably lean, as I've said, towards the narcissism. But that doesn't mean the personality isn't at work. this is where it gets really confusing. I don't think that the differences are just attributed to the narcissistic illusion. So, for instance, as I've talked about before, in a narcissist's upbringing and their formation of an illusion, what they have to do in order to be perfect, this image that they have to maintain and have people reflect back onto them every day, I usually attribute that as being the responsibility of the parents. If there's something wrong there, what the narcissist thinks they have to do in order to be perfect, all the things they go through, grow up in, the emotional censorship, and what they have to attain, this image they hold on to for dear life, and make other people believe at any cost, any and all cost, then doesn't that thereby take precedent? Isn't that the most important thing, the highest priority thing? Well, I think the variations in the illusion are not sufficient in explaining the differences between narcissists. I don't think it's just that. I think there's a person in there, a very stunted and hindered person, a very underdeveloped person that is living in there somewhere. I don't want to humanize them to the point where people think that, oh, they're victims, which they are, and that means I should put up with them and I should do more for them. It's not their fault. Well, no, it's not their fault. But it's not your fault either, and it's not your responsibility to fix it. And it's certainly not your responsibility to stick around so they can destroy you while destroying themselves. I just want to put that back out there. But this distinction between the two, the narcissism and the personality, is foggy, it's muddy. It may not be terribly useful. It's one of those things that may not yield a lot of practical insight at the moment, but I think it's there. I think it's observed. I think it's something to think about. And in particular, in the sort of journey of improving your understanding of narcissists, it's a big leg up. It's a big step getting to that point in your analysis of them and using it to fortify your own defense against them. I think every bit of understanding of what's going on is helpful in maintaining, improving your quality of life in the presence of narcissists, which you're going to have to deal with. I hope I didn't ramble on too long. I hope you like this video. Like it if you do. Share it with somebody you think might benefit from it. Comment in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye.